I think it's appropriate to make an update on the situation in Ukraine, because specifically in the Crimea, because things are developing very fast out there, and I often find that when conflicts break out, a lot of people then forget what starts them off in the first place. We've seen this with the Syrian civil war, and as we go down the line, we could be seeing this with Ukraine. Now, as an outsider, all I can do is take in the information I have and try to digest that and form my perspective and my viewpoint. I don't claim that I'm entirely right, and I'm sure there's things I don't know. So this video is not intended to provoke anyone or offend anyone, although I'm sure it will do both, because the issues at stake are very serious right now. In Britain, when we hear the name Crimea, we think of the war between 1853 and 1856, when of course Britain, France, the Ottoman Empire and other powers were taking on the Russian Empire. So Crimea has a sentimental overtone in this country. The latest developments in Ukraine after the bloodshed in Kiev last week, we now have a situation where Russian troops are on the ground in the Crimea, and we could be looking at a war situation quite soon. I don't want this to be a scaremongering video, so I don't want to use any excessive language or anything other than what's already been reported by various networks. I think this is going to turn, if it does descend into a conflict, it will absolutely be a media conflict, just like the Georgian war was. And I've been looking at both sides. I've been looking at CNN, I've been looking at the BBC, I've been looking at Russia Today to get the other perspective. And what you get is this avalanche of viewpoints. Now, one of the common Russian claims about all of this is that the West is hypocritical because Yanukovych was democratically elected, and now, in Putin's words, Medvedev's words actually, a gang of Kalashnikov-wielding thugs have taken over Ukraine. I have no doubt that there are some unsavoury elements within those opposed to Viktor Yanukovych. I'm sure there are far-right elements, I'm sure there are thuggish elements, but to categorise the entire opposition in that way is perverse, and it's a sort of scaremongering tactic that the Russian side would use in order to justify any military escalation. Now, Putin has just got approval from the Russian parliament to use military force if necessary, but that seems like shallow language because Russian troops are already there. It's my understanding that the Crimea, whilst part of Ukraine, is also semi-autonomous, and from the Russian perspective it's basically Greater Russia, and the Russian Black Sea fleet has been based there since the days of the Tsars. So there's obviously a strong sentimental Russian connection, and from what I can see, locals seem to support the Russian troops. But the official reason for this is that they fear reprisals, or they fear that Putin's justifying this because people in the Crimea fear Ukrainian nationalists somehow rushing in, and all of this reminds me of several situations. Every world crisis is different, but there's obviously echoes of the Crimean War itself. There's also sinister echoes of the former Yugoslavia, and there's some disturbing footage today from Kharkov, from other cities, of ethnic clashes, and it looks like both sides are suffering in these. So far, there hasn't been any reports of deaths since the bloodshed in Kiev last week, but the tension is very, very high right now, and the country does look like it's divided deeply. The worst thing that can happen in this situation is a Yugoslavia-style breakup, because we know what happened with that. It ended up in ethnic cleansing. Now, I'm not saying that to scaremonger. I'm going on what I'm seeing in the images here. It's unsettling. People watching this might think, I'm going to be pro-West, I'm going to be anti-Russia. I'm not going to claim I'm entirely in the middle, but I think both sides have responsibility. Now the important thing here is that whilst the Crimea may be autonomous, nevertheless it is part of Ukraine, and has been since 1991. And I've made this point in another video, I believe the video about Putin. Ever since the Cold War ended, Russia has taken every opportunity it can to bully smaller neighbours into submission. And I think that's what we're seeing once again. Now, they're saying it's to protect Russian civilians, and it may be that Russian minorities in parts of Ukraine are facing some threats. That may be true, but let's not forget there was dozens of young people cut down on the streets last week by Yanukovych's forces. And, you know, a doctor who was a witness to that, I remember seeing her interviewed. She said she's not in any political faction. She saw with her own eyes that unarmed protesters were shot down. Now, it doesn't matter if Yanukovych was democratically elected, because as soon as any leader uses those sort of tactics, then he or she is using dictatorial tendencies. So Yanukovych has a lot to answer for. He claims he fears for his own safety, but what about the 100+ people who were cut down? And yes, I'm aware there was people on both sides killed, but the fact of the matter is a lot of unarmed protesters were gunned down. That was Ukraine's Tiananmen Square moment. Now, if the Russian side can provide evidence proving that it wasn't Yanukovych's people that done that, then maybe they would have something to go on in terms of moral high ground. But right now, Ukrainian anger would be very understandable. But like I say, I think both sides have responsibility, and I have to say, I think Ukraine's been showing a lot of restraint, because they haven't rushed into the Crimea at this stage and fought back the Russian troops. But in the end of the day, Russia has violated Ukrainian sovereignty here. And when you hear Russia talking about the West keeping its nose out of it, that's pretty hypocritical, because it's Russia that has invaded Ukrainian sovereignty. And Russia has been doing this since the end of the Cold War to any satellite states that it wants to subjugate. Basically, Putin's philosophy is about the greater Russia, and it always has been. So it's naive to think that Vladimir Putin has no other objective than protecting Russians. But let's just wait and see how this develops. I really hope the situation de-escalates. Putin is not helping matters. What he could do right now is reassure the West, reassure the Ukrainian leaders that these Russian troops are not going to engage in any combat. And for their part, the Ukrainian side should not provoke or intimidate Russian minorities. And if that is happening, that's... but you know, this is a very, very tense situation. This is extreme nationalism developing on both sides, and that sort of nationalism is a recipe for disaster. So I do think that both sides have a part to play, but the media also has a part to play, and that goes for both sides. Both sides have an obligation, I'm talking about the media here, to report the truth as they see it, to try and be objective, and not use inflammatory headlines that can't be substantiated. But I've made this point before, I guarantee you if this develops into a conflict, it's going to be immediate conflict, and I guarantee you Russia today will be pumping out propaganda left, right and centre. They've done it in the Georgian War and they will do it again. True, we'll also see propaganda from the BBC and CNN, which will be vociferously anti-Russian probably. So that's why I'm saying everyone needs to calm down here, because this is a very serious situation, and if it escalates much further we could be looking at something very unpleasant. So I just hope things calm down, because I think if Ukraine partitioned, that would be a repeat of the wars in the former Yugoslavia. No one wants to see that. So I would say right now the Russian side is doing more to provoke, because they're the ones who have sent troops in. So I think Putin can send out a message that he has not got bad intentions by saying, look, we'll protect our people, but we are not preparing for war here, and we will But Putin is doing nothing to alleviate fears in this situation. Whereas Ukraine, on the other hand, Ukrainian troops have held back, showing incredible restraint in this situation. This is an invasion of Ukrainian sovereignty. So that's my thoughts on the latest developments. Things may transpire. I'm going based solely on what is developing at this stage. I don't know everything. I don't claim to know everything, and I may be wrong about some of the things I've said. I'm basically going as an outside observer, and I think it's important to make the video at this point, because the danger of making a video later on is I won't include things that are raw as they happen. Now, I'm not on the ground, I'm not a journalist, I'm simply a citizen of the world looking on at the situation. But that's my thoughts on the situation. I'm sure there'll be pro-Russian people here infuriated by what I'm saying, but the fact of the matter is Russian troops, you can say Crimea is part of Russia, but it's been part of sovereign Ukraine since 1991. Russia has compromised Ukrainian sovereignty. That's what it comes down to right now.